Hi all. Okay, so we're going to go through some of the basics of composition. This is just kind of an overview of how writing works. I'm going to go ahead and I went from the modules page so we could show you how to pull it up. And I'm going to download the basics of composition PowerPoint here, and then we're going to pull it up. I won't do that with all of them, but for the first couple, I like to just to make sure you understand how to get to all the material, especially because we're all online. Okay. So this is, as I said, it's a kind of a high level overview of how writing works. Don't be overwhelmed if it seems like there's a lot of pieces. We're going to go through all of it in more detail, most of it in more detail throughout the semester, but I think it helps, at least it helps me to know where we're going first, to see how all the pieces fit together and why they're important. Before we talk about the individual pieces and bits and and focus on those. So we're to start with the parts of a paragraph, because a paragraph in most writing is really the main unit. So how writing works in general. So people like things to have a beginning, a middle, and the end, right? Like when we talk about stories, we talk about the beginning, the middle, and the end. Once upon a time, they lived happily ever after. Things like that. And these terms generally apply to fiction, but the same concept actually applies to pretty much all types of writing, and it also applies to each stage within the writing process. So you might have heard that essays have 3 parts. I don't know how much experience you guys have with essays, but I feel like this is pretty common. You have an introduction, which is your beginning. You have a body, which is your middle, and you have a conclusion, which is your end, right? And each of these 3 parts has a job. The introduction introduces the topic and gives the reader background information, states the main purpose of the essay. The body presents the main part of the argument and any evidence needed to support it. And the conclusion reminds the reader of the main purpose of the paper, summarizes the main points, and leaves the reader with an everlasting image. Just like in fiction, we need something to kind of start the story, start the paper. And we do the main part in fiction. It would be the main part of the story is the body or the middle. And then we tell what happens next and leave the reader with a sense of closure. That's the ending in fiction, the conclusion in an essay. Well, the same is true for paragraphs. We need a beginning to introduce the topic of the paragraph. Otherwise, the reader doesn't know where they are, what's going on. And we need a middle to provide the main points of the paragraph. And we need an ending to summarize what was said and why it's important. So these different parts of the paragraph, the beginning, the middle, and the end, or the introduction, the body, the conclusion, whatever you want to call them, they have specific names. The beginning is called the topic sentence. It's the first sentence of the paragraph. The middle is called the exposition. It's that big chunk in between the topic sentence and the last sentence. And the end is called the transition sentence. It's not the best name for it. The transition sentence is mostly there to kind of tie a bow on the end of the paragraph. So let's talk a little more about these 3 elements. Topic sentences tell the reader what the paragraph will be about. There's a typo there. Help your paragraph to have structure. Again, it helps to have a beginning, a middle, and the end. It helps you to focus when you're writing the paragraph, because everything in your paragraph should relate back to that topic sentence. Just starting a paragraph and then figuring, just kind of writing until it feels like it's ended is not really the best way to approach these. It tends to lead to disorganization, and you don't really even know what you're saying. And so in classes, the easiest way to write topic sentence is to do what's called reversing the prompt. So let's say your prompt is, what was the best day of your life? Your topic sentence might be, the best day of my life was. And all you do is just take this last part of the prompt, the best day of my life, and just add a blank at the end of it. And that'll give you your topic sentence 99% of the time without a whole lot of sitting there and stressing out on your end. So the exposition is just a fancy term for that middle part of the paragraph. It's everything that is in between the topic and transition sentences. And the goal here is to explain and elaborate upon your topic sentence. This is where you provide evidence, provide explanations of that evidence. Anything that's not covered in the topic and transition sentence is typically covered in the exposition. So like with the essay and the paragraph as a whole, it also has 3 parts. As I said, beginning, middle, and end applies to every stage of writing. It also, when we talk about essays, it'll also apply to your introduction and your conclusion in different ways too. So The 3 steps in the exposition are to introduce your evidence, present your evidence, and analyze your evidence. So in the introduce step, you're going to provide any background information that the reader needs, and you'll lead up to any evidence you'll include. And we're going to talk more about what evidence is in a second. In the present step, you actually just present that evidence. And then in the analyze step, you explain why you included the evidence, why it's important, how it relates back to your point. Just asking yourself, why did I include this, is a good way to get that analyze step. And then your transition sentence is the last sentence of the paragraph. It is badly named. You're not actually providing a transition to the next paragraph, because normally you'd have more than one paragraph in a piece of essay or a piece of writing, right? So what a lot of students do is they try to use it to connect one paragraph to the next. And yes, you can do that, but that takes a lot of practice and a lot of skill to be able to do well. Really more your transition sentence is just summing up, putting a bow on the end of your paragraph, kind of recapping what you said and why it's important to leave the reader with a sense of closure. And it helps the reader to also connect the dots to understand how this evidence that you've provided relates back to your topic sentence and, in an essay, your point as a whole. So transition sentences work a lot like a conclusion in an essay. Easy way to approach them is to start by listing your main points in the paragraph, and then explain how those are connected to your topic sentence. It is actually okay to paraphrase your topic sentence and add to it, just don't repeat it word for word. So you can rephrase that topic sentence to use that as a starting point for your transition sentence. And as we talked about a little bit earlier, to get your topic sentence, all you have to do is rephrase the prompt, reverse the prompt. So although the topic and transition sentences are often what students struggle with the most, they're actually probably the easiest parts of the paragraph to write. So here's a quick summary of paragraph structure. It starts with a topic sentence, beginning of the paragraph, and explains what the paragraph will be about. Then you go into your exposition, which is the middle of the paragraph, where you present and explain your evidence. Sorry, I'm still recovering from that cold. And then you end with a transition sentence, which is the end of your paragraph. It gives the reader closure and explains how the parts of the paragraph are connected. So now let's talk a little bit about evidence, and what I mean by evidence when I talk about evidence in writing. So you're probably thinking about scientific data or crime shows. You're thinking evidence as in, this high-level stuff that you need to do research to get. But the term evidence in writing actually falls under a much bigger umbrella, and it can refer to quotes, datas, descriptions, short stories, comparisons, contrasts, sensory details, anecdotes, just about anything. If I said the worst day of my life was bad because it was raining, it's not great evidence, but the fact that it was raining is evidence as far as we're concerned with writing. If I said that 75% of Americans have a severe phobia of public speaking, that's also evidence. If I said that I like car A better than car B because car A gets better gas mileage, that's a comparison. That's also evidence. So really, evidence is just, it's anything you can use to support your point. Specific types of evidence you'll want to use do depend on the type of writing, and we'll talk a lot more about that throughout the semester. But in a narrative essay, so describing experience and why it matters, that's great evidence. You don't actually need anything, researched or anything more than that. In a lab report, talking about the best day of your life is not going to work very well. So you're going to want something a little bit more scientific, like data from your experiment. So the types of evidence that you use do depend on the type of writing you're doing. But you don't need to stress out about trying to find, the best evidence in the world. Normally, whatever you have that will work is going to work. Okay, so we're going to stop this PowerPoint or this recording here, and then we're going to talk about the types of paragraphs and essays, and I'll be back with that in just a moment.